The Orlando Magic just made their big swing in what they believe will make them a contender. But are they actually ready to compete with the beasts of the East? In the first blockbuster move of the offseason, the Magic traded for Desmond Bane, while Memphis got back what could possibly be their new starting shooting guard in KCP, and other depth guard in Cole Anthony, while also getting a ton of draft picks. Most notably, in the short term, they will get the 16th pick in the 2025 draft, a Suns 2026 first round pick, which could become quite decent depending on the Suns' offseason and ensuing health next year. This is alongside a 2028 and 2030 first round pick. Those two and the Suns picks are unprotected, as well as a 2029 first round pick swap. Now we'll get into the Grizzlies side of things in a future video, but let's look at the fit of Desmond Bane in Orlando. How he does, but doesn't, address many of their key weaknesses, and whether the hefty price of 4 first round picks plus 2 rotational pieces from their most recent postseason will be the detriment of Orlando's future goals. Let's start with the most obvious and biggest benefit of Desmond Bane joining the Magic: 3-point shooting. Off the catch, Desmond Bane is one of the best in the league. Whether it's on the wing, out of the corner, or straight on, he's a 41% career 3-point shooter on over 6 attempts a game, and a lot of that impact is done off of the catch from behind the arc. Immediately, Bane offers a level of production and commands such a tight level of defense that will result in significantly improved floor spacing around Desmond Bane for the likes of Paolo Banchero. Another thing this era of Magic basketball has not had a single ounce of is movement shooting ability. The Magic tried to address this in the 2023 draft with the selection of Jett Howard, however his production as a shooting wing hasn't panned out in the slightest. Bane immediately comes in as a very solid movement shooter that should completely open up this offense in ways they have never been able to do before. Part of it is the movement shooting itself, of course, but it's the combination of his great movement shooting and his counters out of it that will truly open up this offense. Bane will get to run off pin downs off of great screeners in Wendell Carter Jr. and Goga Bitadze, which could lead to very good open threes for himself, but could also lead into dishes into Wendell Carter Jr. in the short roll, who's a very underrated short roll passer, who could then be finding a cutting Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner. Deadly. They could even run this action with Paolo, where Paolo and Bane get to have a two-man game, and Paolo is in the short roll, which is a deadly threat as a creator and as a pure bucket getter out of that short roll. This doesn't even include the fact that Bane himself is great at attacking closeouts and being a secondary creator. He has improved significantly as a playmaker over the last couple of seasons, and so attacking these closeouts is going to be a strength of his here. His gravity as a great movement shooter will command many aggressive closeouts, which will result in some easy mid-range jumpers and push shots for Bane, but could also result in him setting up easy buckets for, say, Wendell Carter Jr. in the dunker spot, or a cutting Paolo Banchero. Now, the weak side shooting out of all of these actions is limited, and that's why I didn't mention how Bane could drive and kick to a 3-point shooter, because, they still don't have many of those. But at the very least, the 3-point shooting off movement and ensuing ability counters from Bane will open up many layers of this Orlando offense that they simply have never been able to consider, use, or exploit up to this point. Outside of the great off-ball scoring threat, Bane will add another layer of team creation and self-creation on this roster. Again, similar to Suggs, Franz, and Paulo, better and worse than some of them, Bane is ideally not a primary lead creator, but is a very good secondary one. The hope is that with all 4 of their core plus Wendell Carter Jr., who's an above-average passer for the 5 spot, that the Playmake by committee system will work. They're not going to have a true lead guard, but pretty much everyone on the floor is an above-average passer at their position outside of Jalen Suggs, and all of them are going to be positive creators in terms of their core 4. Whether they can succeed without that true number 1 lead guard creator, that remains to be seen, but another secondary playmaker will certainly help. Now, whether Bane does add a new layer in the creation department in terms of playmaking is a little bit uncertain, but where he certainly will add a new layer is within his self-creation. Now, certainly Paolo has great traits as a self-creator and has even expanded into hitting off the dribble threes at a higher clip as we saw in the postseason. Certainly Suggs has some moments, as does Franz Wagner, but Bane will add a pull-up 3-point threat that currently does not exist on this Magic roster. Late in games, especially in the postseason, having a player who can hit from deep off the dribble is essential. And as mentioned earlier, this will likely play into a deadly two-man game with Paolo Banchero. The seal on top of everything is that all of this production is done with absurd efficiency. He's consistently a 50-40-90 threat while posting an assist-to-turnover ratio of 2.2 this past season. Now, although the core thought with Bane joining the Magic is how he significantly improves the offense, he also fits in perfectly with their defensive culture. Now, he may be the worst defender in their starting lineup, but that's a representation of how good this Magic's defense is, more so than it is an indictment on Bane. Bane has been, and I'm sure will continue to be, a very good defender. He has a relatively high motor and good perimeter defense. And on a team that already has a great defensive identity, I don't doubt that that factored into the Magic's willingness to make a big move for him. Sure, they wanted someone that could improve the offense, but they wanted someone who fit their defensive identity. The great component of Bane's fit defensively on this team is that, contrary to a lot of his time in Memphis, especially prior to this season and the emergence of Jalen Wells, he will spend basically zero time defending the opposition's best players, and if anything, will be often guarding their worst guard, as Jalen Suggs will get that primary matchup. This will allow even more energy for Bane to do his thing on the offensive end and potentially get even more efficient and more productive. Now, before going any further and looking at some of the negatives, I want to acknowledge the impact of no KCP and no Cole Anthony in the future of Orlando. Ultimately, there's not significant loss here. Cole Anthony can have his moments off the bench as an offensive spark, but it has continued to be very inconsistent, and Anthony Black will now likely step into a larger role to fill that void, alongside Bane and Suggs splitting some of their time with the bench units. In terms of the loss of KCP, obviously when the Magic signed him last summer, the hope was going to be he was going to be a high-level role player. He was going to shoot threes well. He was going to be a three-point shooter and floor spacer for this team. Obviously, that didn't happen. Disastrous season shooting the ball and became a negative at times on the court because of it. Bane obviously fills in that starting role at a significantly higher level, and although having KCP off the bench would have been a nice luxury, without the three-point shot, rebounding, and getting back to where he was in Denver, it's really not a significant loss. The loss of the picks, that's where it's of more concern, and we'll get into that shortly. But let's get back to the on-the-court impact. Even with all the offensive improvements that Desmond Bane will now bring, how many concerns remain? The answer, probably still quite a lot, unfortunately. Ultimately, the weak side shooting options when Bane has the ball in his hands are going to be very, very limited, and as three-point heavy dominant as the league is now, that could be an issue. Caleb Houston was the only guy on the roster last season who shot above league average efficiency from three, and the only ones hovering around league average were Corey Joseph, pre-injury Mo Wagner, and Gary Harris. And two of them are old, and one of them's coming off injury. No guarantee Corey Joseph and Gary Harris are even on the roster. Barring another big move that adds more shooting depth, which would likely have to be a future move of Franz Wagner, which likely isn't happening anytime soon, then the only way Orlando is going to improve this is via internal improvement, which hasn't exactly gone well so far. Paolo Banchero, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner especially need to continue to improve from three, especially in the case of Franz, who continues to seemingly get worse from three instead of better throughout his NBA career. Ideally, you're also going to see some bounce-back seasons from three closer to league average, or at least average for their position, in the likes of Wendell Carter Jr. and Jonathan Isaac. Anthony Black is another guy who's shown flashes and someone ideally you'd like to see improve from three, but that wasn't a projectable part of his game as a prospect. It was never something he was expected to be great at, so maybe more realistically, you get Tristan da Silva to get to be at least league average, as that could be something that opens up his game as a true playoff usable wing. Point being, there's still going to be a severe lack of spacing and three-point shooting in many scenarios. Desmond Bane just improves it from very, very bad to quite bad. You know, it's like from horrific to it's still pretty bad. Wildly enough, based on where they were last year, that's still going to open up a lot of their offense, because last year it was, again, horrific. At its best, this team can likely hover around or just below league average on offensive rating now compared to where they were last year, but I struggle to see how they'll get any better without significant improvements from three. Now, that could be enough alongside having a top three defense in the league, maybe, to push them into contender status, but it's still going to be their biggest struggle going forward. So let's finally talk about the picks. 4 first-round picks got sent to Memphis, including a potential short-term roster building tool in pick 16 in this year's draft. But I'll be completely honest, I'm not at all concerned about the picks in terms of drafting players for their roster. Especially post-trade, all of these picks, barring the one out of their control, that being the 2026 Suns pick, are picks that are going to be in the 20s and ultimately aren't likely to yield a great playoff-level rotational player. The biggest loss is the opportunity cost of not being able to use these picks for future trades to acquire different stars or high-level starters in the future. After this trade, they have no future tradable first-round picks. Their future firsts consist of the Nuggets first in this year's draft at pick 25, and then a 2027, 2029, and 2031 first-round pick, all of which are not going to be eligible to be traded until their respective drafts, thanks to the Stephen rule. The Stephen rule being you cannot trade firsts in consecutive seasons. Long story short, the Magic now have zero flexibility in terms of moving picks in future trades, as none of those first-round picks, as mentioned, can be traded until each pick's respective draft. Meaning, unless another big trade occurs as they trade away one of their core, this Magic core is pretty well locked in for the next few years, as they don't have significant ways to add to it. Now, if you believe this core 4 of Suggs, Bane, Wagner, and Paolo was good enough to challenge for a title, then it's worth giving up that flexibility, as, well, what's flexibility if you can win? However, if you think they're still a move or two away where they might need to package a couple of first-round picks together, then there's reason to be concerned about pushing all the chips into acquiring Bane and in turn committing to this core 4 via their lack of flexibility on the trade front going forward. Either way, there's no doubt the Magic should be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference next season, when you consider the fact that they're hopefully healthier next year compared to the injuries to Paolo Banchero, to Franz Wagner, to Jalen Suggs, and even Mo Wagner this season, plus the addition of Desmond Bane, and the Magic should be able to compete for a top 3 seed in the East. I still have some real concerns about their offense, but it's improved enough that in a wide-open Eastern Conference that's going to be even more hampered by the injury of Jason Tatum for next season, the Magic have every reason to be optimistic about reaching new heights and pushing for an NBA title as soon as next season. But the best part? Their core is all just entering or not yet entering their prime. The best is yet to come in Orlando, and I respect their front office for making a splash to push for their first NBA title in franchise history.